This makes me physically sick. I'm sorry, but it's the height of selfishness. Yes, selfishness for a 50-plus woman or even a 50-plus man to have a child. Do you think you're going to live forever? How will a child be able to cope if your health takes a turn for the worse?
Very harsh, but to be honest, the truth. Every child is a blessing, but at that age I would adopt if need be. 45 is the absolute maximum, in my opinion. Good luck, Naomi.
Many congratulations. Ignore the judgmental haters who usually, when they are labelling older women as selfish, ignore the selfishness of younger people who reproduce carelessly and expect other people, taxpayers for instance, to pick up the tab.
It is, however, completely about the mortality and factoring in the much higher probability of you dying before your child even finishes their GCSEs.
Unnecessary, unnatural and self-centred, those poor babies.
Well said. The whole piece is filled with a palpable sense of Western entitlement.
We went to the recurrent miscarriage clinic at St Mary's, and after waiting months for the appointment with a great consultant and being run through a whole bunch of tests, then it was time for Pete to come in and be tested, and I made him take the morning off work to do it. And then the consultant says, but we're not going to bother testing him because you're too old to me. And I was crushed. I was completely crushed by that. And that set me back for a long time because I just thought, well, you know, here's this expert telling me, forget it, you're too old. Just feeling crushed. And my sister wanted to throw me a surprise party. In fact, my birthday's New Year's Eve and most people are away. So she and Pete had cooked up a very nice concept, but I remember feeling really quite disembodied almost of having to deal internally with the acceptance. I'd resolved many times through my 30s and 40s that I probably wasn't going to have children, and here I was at 50, which in my mind was the end. And so I felt no sense of celebration at all about turning 50. And in fact, we did end up with a very uncomfortable New Year's Eve when the surprise was to go to a burlesque club on the South Bank in London, and as we came out, so did 400,000 people who'd been watching the fireworks, and we ended up getting caught up with them and getting kettled by the police at Trafalgar Square. And it was a horrible night, horrible journey home, a horrible walk home. And for me, being kettled, feeling this kind of end, you know, even the police on horseback were there stopping my progression. You know, there was just nothing joyful in me at all. I was just going to have to grit my teeth and get on with and make the best of a life without children. And so for me it was a really big surprise when Pete turned around a few months later and said, well, he thought we ought to try and find a clinic that would still look at us. And I just thought, hasn't he seen that there's no point, that it's going to make us look like real sad fools? I mean, I'd told very, very few people that we'd been trying for so long, because I felt that it painted us in a poor light, that we couldn't pull a family together somehow. I don't know why I felt that was well, I suppose you don't really want to attract people's sympathy when it doesn't work out.
Pity even.
Yeah, you just want to deal with the disappointment quietly by yourself. And also then people say, how are you feeling about it, but they don't really want to hear. And we were a couple with a nest with no little birds in it, no chicks in it. So anyway, so Pete found a clinic in Barcelona that would see me till the end of being 50. And I really didn't want to go, and he had set up an appointment to go and visit them. We were staying with friends in Provence, and we could catch a train from there. And I actually threw a tantrum at Barcelona station because I so couldn't face the whole process, never mind just the getting prepped for IVF, which is not very comfortable for a woman, but just knowing that it was not going to work out. And couldn't we just like work our way through resolving not having children and not dragging this out any longer? And so I absolutely went berserk at Barcelona station. But it's not like we've got pots of money.
Yeah.
So, you know, to find the money for all these attempts was, you know, quite a thing for us. It was instead of having a new car or having some more money to put towards a joint home together. And so we decided, well, in fact, for me, there was a deciding moment. We had to pay in advance for the cycle, and I was still vacillating about it. I still couldn't make my mind up. And a friend of mine emailed me from Jerusalem to tell me that I should listen to a debate on NPR that mentioned my late father. And so I tuned into it on my computer, and it was a debate about whether or not there was a God, whether or not, whether this house believes in religion or not. And the voice advocating for religion was a rabbi from the West Coast. And his ultimate argument for why, at least if you, whether or not religion was a good thing, but at least why you should believe, was to quote one of my father's anecdotes. My father had been a Holocaust survivor, and he used to tell the story about when he and his father were in a miserable slave labour camp in Upper Silesia in the winter of 1944, and it was the festival of Hanukkah, as it is at the moment, and the prisoners in the barrack gathered together and they decided to celebrate Hanukkah. And so they fashioned a Chanukiah, the candelabra, with for 9 candles, and they got wicks out of their cap, and they pulled together some margarine to make the candles. And so here it was on the first night, and they tried to light the wick, but what nobody had worked out was that margarine doesn't burn, and it just fizzled out. My father, who was then only 14 years old, turned to his father angry and bitter, and he, how could they waste these precious calories? And his father said to him, "Hugo, you and I have seen that you can live up to 3 weeks without food, up to 3 days without water, but you can't live for 3 minutes without hope." And I thought, has there ever been a clearer indication? And I went home that evening and I arranged for the bank transfer, and it felt for me as loud as anything that was my father speaking from the dead to just say, buy a lottery ticket, Naomi, hope. You need some hope. And I just booked a flight on EasyJet to Barcelona one weekend and snuck off. And if there was anything that was different about this trip, I was beyond caring in a way. Mm-hmm. I'd sort of dissociated yes and no, because on the other hand, I also made elaborate preparations to have food in the hotel room when I got back from the clinic, so I wouldn't have to stand up. And I played it absolutely by the book this time. I lay in bed for a whole evening and night so that any embryos wouldn't slip out. Oh yes, and there was something else about Barcelona. How our initial meeting had been over a conversation about the French Second Empire and Empress Eugénie and Napoleon III. And Empress Eugénie, when she was 91, or was it 94, went to Barcelona. She had terrible cataracts, and she found a doctor who was willing to treat her even at that grand age, when she was too old to have anaesthetic, to operate on her cataracts so that she could see again. And the night before I had the embryos implanted, I had been looking for months and months for a pair of suitable frames for spectacles. And as I walked around Barcelona, late night shopping, I wandered into an optician's and I found the perfect pair of frames. So I felt that Eugénie was with me. And who cares about being an old dame?
Yeah. So she's a sort of patron saint of yours, is she?
She's my muse.
Her inspiration.
And the next morning, I walked all the way to the clinic, which was quite some substantial.
It's a long way and uphill too.
Yeah. There was lovely Maria and Dr. Guicha, and I still didn't. It all felt surreal, actually. It all felt quite surreal. I kind of dissociated from thinking about whether it would work or not. And I got back to London.
It makes you wonder whether stress could have been a part of it, in a way.
Well, wanting something to happen, and whether when you relax...
Being more relaxed about it, quite apart from the physical precautions you took as well. Who's to say, but you'd have to do a very big study on that, I suppose, to find any evidence. But it kind of, anecdotally, that's what it felt like.
Yes.
That finally we got a hit when we were, in a way, past caring and had written off the prospects.
Still didn't want to tell anybody about it. There was the chap I was working for was phoning me in Barcelona, and I don't think he noticed that it was a foreign ringtone. I was just saying, "Speak to you on Monday," and because I knew he would rumble me if he found out that I was in Barcelona. Then back in London, my older sister was visiting from New York, and she and I drove up to visit my grandmother, who's 104, and on the way back she said to me, "So, Naomi, you've forgotten all of the baby business now, haven't you? You've put it aside." I went, "Actually, Gabby, I'm due to take a pregnancy test tomorrow." I couldn't lie to her. And then we went to visit my younger sister, and I was wearing these new glasses, and she said to me, "Naomi, where did you get those frames from?" And I didn't want to say to her Barcelona because she'd guess what I was up to. So I said, "George Street." And she said, "There aren't any opticians in George Street." Actually, there is an
That's very sharp of her.
Actually, there is an optician in George Street. But she sensed there was something odd. No, that was Rochelle. So I had to fess up to my two sisters that actually we'd been to Barcelona and I was due to take a pregnancy test the next morning. Pete was here in Cambridge, I was in London, and in the middle of the night I woke up for a pee and I thought, I could do it now early, couldn't I? So one more time. I mean, you cannot imagine how many dozens of those white stick pregnancy tests I have been through. And so one more time, the last one, put it in the pee, took it out, nothing. And I just thought, oh, fuck. And I went back to sleep. Oh, so angry and disappointed. And I just thought, I'm going to have to deal with this in the morning. I don't want to think about it. In the morning, I picked up this stick and I thought, that looks like a bit of pink at the end. Maybe it's not good. And the thing is with IVF, you have to get, even if you have a negative home test, you have to go and get a blood test done as well to prove that you're definitely not pregnant. Otherwise, you have to carry on taking hormones. So I went along for the blood test, and then I walked over to Boots the chemist, found the pharmacist, produced my stick, and I said to her, "Do you think I could be just a little bit pregnant?" And she roared with laughter and she said, "You are pregnant." And I just danced with joy. I just couldn't believe it.
The first time ever I saw your face, I thought the sun rose in your eyes, and the moon the dark and the endless sky.